We're going to give everyone a couple minutes, about 2 minutes or so, to make sure that they're all entered in to the webinar, and then we'll get started. All right, if everybody's ready, I'm going to get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending the Arts and Libraries Virtual Festival. Today's session is Hear Us Out, Methods of Theater Performance as Activism. As a reminder, you can submit questions throughout the session, which we will be answering at the end of the presentation, and we will get to as many as time permits. Brittany S. Harris is an assistant professor of theater in the Department of Communication and Theater Arts at Old Dominion University. Her areas of expertise are in race and performance, theater for social change, and performative community engaged programming. Throughout the Southeast regions of Virginia, North Carolina, DC, and Georgia, Brittany has created numerous community engagement-based projects and conducted workshops on solo performance development and devised theater for the past 10 years. Embracing the theme of social inequality and injustice during these current times, performance has long been used as a tool to challenge existing systems of power and to illuminate causes, issues, and people who are often oppressed, undermined, and underserved. To truly become activism, to cultivate a more collaborative and creative global society from the ground up, theater demands new interactive tools adapted to and for artists and spectators that merge theatrical performance, community building, and conflict resolution. It is now my pleasure to introduce Brittany S. Harris.
Thank you so much, Laura. Sorry, that was a great intro and a great setup. I am again very excited to be at our second annual Arts in the Libraries virtual festival. I think this is a great way to expand what artists do, our methods, our ideologies, and how it connects to us as a whole. And so today I wanted to bring to you all, I think last time I got to speak about just a really nice umbrella of what it looks like to do the performance of protest. But I wanted to talk specifically about theater and some methods and techniques that we use in the industry as we connect to our underserved, undermined, oppressed communities. So before I begin, a majority of my presentation will be a screen share. So if you do have questions or comments or anything that's direct, you can drop that right into the chat, or questions as they come along to you, write them down and then drop them into our Q&A, and we'll come around to them at the end of the presentation. So a little bit that was mentioned in my intro, it said that I follow a method or a practice called performance as research or practice as research. And so performance as research can be defined as a qualitative method that involves the subject matter and the method of experiencing the body in time, space, and history. So examining performance, you look at that as your object of study and then your method of investigation. And then that's the presentation of the scholarly data, what you create in the performance. So with this, hear us out. Methods of theater performance and activism. This is not a comprehensive list of anything, but a nice overview of what performance activism is and what it implores. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Any questions, concerns that come up, please drop them in the chat. My moderators are definitely looking out for it. So embodying a resolution. At the foundation of our existence is the desire to identify and understand one's own purpose. And artistic expression for years have been an outlet for exploring such depths. And in the means of theatrical performance, there is a platform that exists for artists to explore their own roots, questions about morals, society, and spirituality. It's so funny because with this work, it may invoke and provoke questions, not only about those who are being highlighted or focused on, but primarily as the observer of the work. How do you question yourself? I talk about this work being transformative. It can be reflective. This type of performative work can also be used as a lens or even a mirror to yourself. Activism of any caliber is a strategy in its narratives. Think about it. If you think about activism, you think about who's the cast of protagonists, who's cast as the antagonist, and where's the setting, and where's this happening? How do we use props? Is there a picket sign or a poster? Are we wearing costumes? Are we all wearing the same shirt? What language are we using, the rhetoric? However, the specificity of using the stage, which can be found like outside on a street corner or the steps of a city hall or an actual stage, it can be used to amplify and address systems of oppression, nationally charged issues that has its own unique history to the US, but many, many other modes of execution. So the topics that I'm going to talk about, you can hear there's life happening. Let's let life happen there. There we go. So the topics addressed today, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what theater as activism is and how and why we do this work, and then setting the stage. I'm going to actually show and talk about a couple of methodologies and techniques that we use in our activism. And then we're going to look a little bit at a solo performance piece of mine called Pedigree, and it implements some of these activism techniques that we talked about. So, before you is a quote, and it says, not just for entertainment purpose, but enlightening purposes. When you think about theater and when you think about performance of any method, so watching a film or going to an art gallery or whatnot, I want you to think about this particular quote. Can the work that is meant to entertain us also enlighten us, invoke us, to think us, to drive us? I want you to think about how work that is meant to just purely be for entertainment can enlighten you beyond a place that where you started from and then where you end up at. So I want you to think, what does that statement mean to you? And hopefully in our Q&A, you can say, you know what, when I thought about that, it made me resonate this way, if you want to share that in the end, but not just for entertainment purposes, but enlightening purposes. That's what I do, the work that I do. When I look at Theater for Social Change, I look at how the stage literally can be a platform to talk about certain issues that are otherwise hidden on our little laptops and forums and posts and whatever. What can we do when we actually give the stage light, highlighting this? And then an extension for me is giving the space to dialogue with not only the audience, but everyone involved in the process. So theater as activism, how? Okay. So theater as a form of activism and activism as a form of theater has been with us for a very long time. Using theater to raise awareness on social rights issues not only educates the audience, but also can create empathy and connection. So Performative activism relies on the ability to tell stories to diverse audiences that will inspire action towards justice. See, live theatrical performance in particular offers an exceptional form of audience engagement that usually your human rights organizations don't implement, but can find more useful than just circling around, here, read about this, or here's this literature, here's some rhetoric that I want you to repeat. Theater is also a highly adaptable medium, and we're able to be molded over and over again according to whatever the vision of that social location that we're in, or the cultural relevance or topic that we're addressing. When I take a look at these images here, I think about how theater can be used. It can be a tool for elimination and challenging systems of power. Just imagine if the oppressor has never seen themselves in the light other than what they think they saw. But let's put it in a perspective of, now I want you to see this character embodied, what I see in you, now you can see in yourself. It also can encourage interactive social collaboration process. Last time I got to present this, we did this kind of virtual tapestry and image theater, this idea that while we're all living under, say, the umbrella of COVID-19 and its restrictions, where is the common ground? How do we connect to that? How do we live under these circumstances? And it can also help in redefining what I call social roles and norms, and extending a platform to amplify. Again, that's a word. It's no longer just behind our screens, y'all. Like, it's honestly amplifying causes or culturally and socially relevant issues that are often, again, oppressed, undermined, and underserved. So we got the how. So why? So, okay, all right, great. I get how it works, but why are we doing this work, right? Why this particular form? We could always just read a newspaper or scroll through a headline on a news feed or be inspired by a piece of visual art, but then somehow in there you can become disengaged. To see change and consider multiple resolutions, and in some cases becoming part of the resolution, setting the stage for civil dialogue beyond our own individual admissions, that's why we do this work. Using theater as activism can provide a set of collaborative skills that can be adapted to or for artists and spectators, which there's this implementation of Augusto Bilal, who I'll talk about him. He's a theater practitioner, activist theater practitioner based out of Brazil. You probably have heard of the pedagogy of oppress. So Freire and him, they have similar things. And he talks about the concept of the spect actor, that you're not just a spectator experiencing this for those entertainment purposes, right? But you are coming to be engaged in this process. So the spect actor there. But these unique set of skill sets that you can gather from this, you can gain creative expression and exploration. It's really important for community building. I think about every time I show some of my solo works that I tour, I always connect with a community advocate that's relevant to the issue. Like, for instance, today, the piece that you're watching from Pedigree, I've connected with usually someone from the ODU Counseling Center or from a counseling entity in the area to supplement this material, because this material can be re-triggering. So how do we protect ourselves through the work? But this idea of reaching out to advocates from various industries and professionals that can help speak to the topic or issue at hand. Again, having people come out with more than they came in with. But primarily, it is about that conflict resolution. It's about creating dialogue and having the discourse to work through that dialogue. So here, again, these are not a comprehensive list, but this is an overview of a select few performance or theater activism techniques and methods I've explored over time. These are uniquely special to me. By golly gum, this is not comprehensive. There is over tens and tens and tens of them. But I wanted to highlight these four because I can see this work being a tool that we can implement here at the university a lot. If we are using the classroom as a platform, our dance classrooms, our studio spaces, even our found spaces on campus, we have that nice common ground where our lion is, or any space in web. I mean, these are some really nice tools to implement there. So I'm going to highlight some of them and talk about them a little bit. But as you can see, two of them come from Theater of the Oppressed. I mentioned Augusto Balaus. That's his particular technique. So Theater of the Oppressed is a genre of theater that was developed to foster an open interaction between the audience and participants, spectator. And it was used as a means of promoting social and political change and alignment in Brazil in the 1970s. Just imagine that this foundational work is still being used now. We're just evolving it, right? Again, he did coin that term spectator, and that means it's for the audience to become active, explore, show, analyze, and then transform the reality in which they're living in. So over here, the first one is image theater. As you can see kind of in the background, you see these images of people in either moments of distress or moments of liberation. So image theater is still images used to explore abstract concepts such as feelings, relationships, emotions, as well as realistic situations. So these images are then placed together and dramatized or brought to life. So just imagine if I say, I give you a word like hidden or suppressed. What does suppressed look like if I take an image to suppress myself over? You hold that. And then I say, well, what's the opposite of suppressed? Open, liberated. And what does that image look like? So this idea of emerging and evolving an image from one to the next, I absolutely love it. This method is often used to explore the internal and external oppression, unconscious thoughts and feelings. The next one, which I'm very excited about because we don't hear about this when we hear about like forum theater and image theater, but Comp in Head is one that is very specific. And I'm very, very grateful that Pedigree explores this. So it's the powerful technique that explores the internal oppression that we feel. So it's an internal voices and societal messages and obstacles and fears that prevent us from living fully and liberated. I think that we are becoming a society that a lot is internally processed and not external. And so I'm very, very excited to create a piece of theater captured on film that explores that concept literally. And then the other two here, you probably are familiar with this term called guerrilla theater. It's actually also from the 60s and 70s. Again, something that started so far back when R.G. Davis and the San Francisco Mime Troupe. It's a form of social and politically active public performance. So actors use improv, so thinking on his feet, not actual script, satire, and then drama to disrupt cultural norms. So hopefully maybe in the year or two, we put on a theatrical production here that explores that. And this is actually a newer one, the Hendricks method. There's something called the Black acting method that has evolved maybe over the last 10 years. And this is from Sherelle Luckett and Tia Schaefer. And the Hendricks method is really good at what we're talking about, devised theater. Devised theater is similar to improv, except rather than it being completely made up each time, you come up with the concept or a thought or a phrase, and you take that and you expound on it. And then you can either circle from real life experiences, dance, rap, singing, but then you create this piece just from scratch. And then that's what's presented out there. So that's the Hendricks method. So these are 4 different types of methodologies that implore theater as activism that I think is really neat. And hopefully you get to see these in person over the next year or so through the university. So all that goes to say, great, you taught me some of them. You told me why, you told me how, but like, what's the big question? And for me, I'm always asking, what's the intent and impact of this work? Whenever I am led to do something, main stage, social work, solo work, I always let my curiosity and passion lead me. So when you're thinking about a particular project or issue, I do like to identify like how the community, what community I'm serving, is there a potential partner in that advocate? And then what is the guiding question? What's leading me to talk about this? What's firing me up about this? So some things to consider is that, theater for activism, it can be a couple things. It can be confrontational, it can be demonstrational, it can be a protest. But also it can be experimental, it can be social, it can be political, also psychological, and that involves its own theories with it too. But those are the things that lead for this work. But some things I want you to consider, I'm going to kind of just brush over them real quickly, is the performative action, right? Is it about what you see or is it about what's being said? And usually with theater as activism is a little bit of both. The importance of audience participation. Is this work meant to be just seen or experienced or both, right? The importance of location. I talked about that found space theater. Do we actually use the theater stage with the chairs and everything? Or do we find a space to do this work? Take advantage of the natural environment of where the issue takes place. If we're talking about the what's happening in St. Paul and how they're destroying that community, how about we do the piece in St. Paul's quadrant and talk about how they're literally gentrifying and pushing out that area, redeveloping it. But where's the relationship with the community, right? Back to those, what curiosity drives you. The mobility of this, right? Not only is the performance, but where is it being formed? Is it performed? Is it stationary, one place, or can it evolve? Can it move? Can it be a walking piece of theater that walks through the downtown area of Granby or somewhere else, right? If it's about environmental, right? You have an environmental issue. What happens if you walk along the shores of Ocean View Beach? You know what I mean? And show people your involvement with that. Again, the importance of the mission and the intent. Who is this for and what for? And then assessing these impacts. We have to give a space for people to talk back, to give their feedback and not just experience, but actually have that dialogue and discourse. So let's come to what I'm going to be showing you all today, a sample of a case study of how I've implemented this theater as activism work. The piece that I'll be showing you today is called Pedigree, and I'm calling it Personifying Resistance Through Theater. Performing Pedigree is a short performance piece. Now, note that the two forms of theater that are used in this piece, activism pieces, are image theater and then the cop in head, both again from Augusto Balau's Through the Oppressed method. So a little bit about Pedigree, and then I'm going to show you an excerpt from Pedigree. Hopefully I'll be bringing you back in its entirety next year to kind of talk about what this actual personifying resistance and redemption is. And that's a whole other thing, right? But I would love after that to give you a space to process, and then we'll lead and open what our Q&A. So a little bit about Pedigree. Conceptualized in summer 2020, Pedigree is a short performance piece about a first-time protester sharing her emotional experience with being arrested and disrespected. The piece explores the lengths in which one declares to take back their own power after years of mental and emotional anguish at the hands of racial societal tormentors from her past and present. Embodying creative resistance against inequality, Pedigree is about personal acceptance and recovery from the inexplicit influences of racial hatred and violence. In the wake of the political backdrop of the Black Lives Matter movement, this applied theater work is relevant to the Black community and Brown communities, and providing insight to cathartic resolution and engaging in a civil dialogue beyond the headlines and the hashtags about police brutality and just cause for the BIPOC community. See, in developing this piece, I found there were moments of personal catharsis and release, but I was also still lamenting when I was developing Pedigree because of the continued displays of groundless mass incarcerations, mistreatment, disrespect, and at times misinformed, distorted narratives of Black and Brown bodies still present on my social media and forums. And in doing so, these spectacles invoked a lot of trauma vicariously, and it started to hinder my everyday to-day movement. I was down. So I found that not only performing this, but writing this was my own personal story of resistance and personal acceptance. So like I mentioned before, this is about the performance of redemption and resistance. And then the imagery is the concept of performance of redemption is this idea of taking your own self-expression. So however that is, theater, dance, poetry, and you're going to take that, shift and deconstruct the negative imageries that are displayed before us about oppression and abuse. So no more just snapshots or images or all these videos that capture a single moment of distress or a paralyzing image or a recorded clip on repeat, blatantly disrespecting a person of color, but rather shifting the traumatized and lived experience on its head, reflecting the opposite. And that's what performing redemption looks like and resistance. So I'm going to show you a clip from Pedigree, and then we'll come back and chat a little bit. Don't ask me about the scars. Just don't. I feel as though that's all I ever talk about these days are these scars. Look, just don't ask me about them. Yes, these. You should wear them as a badge of honor. A badge? Really? You know, there's not enough makeup in the world that could cover them. Everlasting marks. So don't ask me about the scars.
Office 7 Lodger 1867, correction. 701. 7 701 7. What are also
Please don't ask me about the scars. You're still looking, staring. Well, you never seen them like this before, huh? You see. Well, I have. I see them every day when I go for my morning run or to the office, sitting in my car waiting for the stoplight to change, and I just so happen to glance out my passenger side window and, yeah, I've seen plenty of folks with far worse. Of course, most try to disguise them, but the signs are still there. Cover them up, hide them behind brown eyes. Some blue, green, but mostly brown. Yep. Turn their heads, stuff and plug their ears, shut their mouths. The scars aren't invisible to those who've been through the same battles. See, people like me, and no, I'm not talking about my race. I'm talking about a hunger, being hungry, searching for something that satisfies you. May I trouble you for something to drink? Hello? Water? Milk, perhaps? Some milk? Milk and cookies. Simple things. When you get in trouble, you start thinking about the simple things, simple times in life. Oh, I want to have a glass of milk and cookies. Just like when I was a kid. Simple, somewhat unassuming, meek, humble, modest. So I want you all to kind of think about what was memorable from that clip. Did things stick out? Are you drawing any correlations from the original question that I posed to you about entertainment versus enlightenment, that I mentioned about the internalized work of the Coppenhead type of theater as activism method, what other questions that it leads you to, more about what I do as this work. And then I would love for us to kind of turn it over to having a discussion. Like, again, I hope I get to bring the entirety of Pedigree to the Arts and Library Festival next year. But I did want to just take some time again to just introduce you all to another tool beyond hashtags and changing your profile picture. And nothing's wrong with that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there is so much more we could be implementing. And here's another tool to do so. So thank you. I'm not sure if my moderators are going to pop on. And there it is. Thank you. All right, great. Oh, thank you, Helene.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So that is a whole lot to process, even in that clip.
What
And
this
that's-
space is for. That's a
great.
lot for us to process. That's what it's for.
Yeah, and it, I mean, powerful doesn't, barely begin to talk about it. One of the, I'll go back to what you said right initially, as far as things, this being enlightening in a way, where it kind of brings you through these processes, and puts you present in these moments, and that's really important. One of the questions that I kind of have with that is that, so as we're dealing with a lot of issues that have been thrust forward in the past couple of years, and really brought into our center stage, if you will, of attention, but while we're also being as audiences and as participants, and even as creators, being in these sort of virtual environments, how do we keep connecting to people in those ways, and encouraging this kind of participation to allow someone who might not be as familiar with it to go through these processes in a
Right.
way?
I think, Sterling, it's presenting the opportunity. I think, again, I don't think people, and I use this word with my students all the time, have permission to think outside forums, posts, and pictures. You know what I mean? Or private text messaging that we do, and it's fine. Like, I think discourse can look different. However, it is providing spaces for that, right? So, but if you don't know about it, then how can we do it? So having a space to even talk about what this kind of work is, that's where it starts, because you can't very well just know how something operates and go into it. You have to have someone that can come in, not necessarily lead the charge, but lead what this is about and provide, hey, just let you know, I just had a practitioner come up and talk about performances, activism, theater of the oppressed. Do we know anyone that does that kind of work? Can we bring them in? But it is, again, providing a space or an opportunity for it. So I think it's kind of that. And then it's also not being complacent and being just taking what you're given, right? Part of this was you all seeking out different artists and their methods and what they do in their areas of expertise. If all you know is, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and put a statement of Black Lives Matter on our website, that should say it. We're going to change this on our, that's a great start. Thank you. But if you're not implementing it, then how so? How do you implement Black Lives Matter? Oh, do we bring in an artist that talks about this? Do we, you know what I mean? So it kind of goes beyond just being complacent and taking advantage of, there might be something outside the box, Googling, using that, you know what I mean? So it's having the permission, and that's how it can get exposed, like thinking there's something outside the box, but then doing the work, researching and seeing, is there another method? Is there something else? Because we're not getting if we're not being fed the way we need to be fed, then how do we get fed somewhere else? So hopefully that answered it. It's a bit of a both thing. Like, yeah, you have to want to do it. You have to be able to be open to it, but you have to know that there are people, that opportunity is there. So that takes looking into it and research.
Right. Yeah, that great. So, and then also you were talking about just sort of stage as a platform, but going beyond just your traditional theater environment, taking it out into the streets, into different locations and environments. And that's really important. And I think in a lot of ways it helps kind of bridge those gaps between different audiences and who would,
Absolutely.
who would
And then
see.
also, Sterling, accessibility, right? I think people think theater is like, oh, you go to Page Theater. You know what I mean? People think theater, all right, well, fine, we'll bring the theater to you. I mean, boom. All right, since you said you couldn't see we bring in the damn show to you, and or involving you in the show. So I think this is another way to make it more accessible, right? It's also breaking whatever stereotype that comes along with what theater is about, right? I'm just coming to be entertained, or that's going to be a provocative, but we'll talk about it for a day or so. But if this work can transform you, again, coming in one way and leaving another, then man, we've done it. And if that means we need to take it to you and take it to the street or whatever, or take it to a corner or take it to whatever, I mean, that's what this work can do. That's how we can create the platform for that. We can create the material for that, the rhetoric for that. We can create a piece that we cannot perform this anywhere but in the location. That can happen too. Or we create a piece that can be adapted to multiple locations. I mean, whatever. And that's where that practitioner and assistance comes in at, and somebody with an expertise in it and blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Well, and like speaking of locations, like if and you mentioned the St. Paul's
Quadrant
project that's going on,
Yeah.
and if you had a performance happening in there that's site specific,
Mhm.
not only does it connect to that community, but there's another side of the community that's removed from that might not be there to be able to see it, to be able to perform with it. How would you approach maybe engaging those people who this just might be out of their scope of reference, might
Right.
not be aware of what's going on?
Right. Well, it all starts before you even put on the performance. I mentioned about what drives you, and then when you drive, you look for the community and who to connect to, your partners. It's the type of work that it won't work unless you've done your research with that community. And research doesn't mean watching them and studying them, but being involved with them. So you understand where those blind spots, for lack of a better word, are. To be quite honest, this type of work won't bring in people that much that they're not familiar with in your face type of theater. They're not. But what they are familiar with are the kids in the community. They're familiar with the entities in the community, like, for instance, Teens with a Purpose, which is based out of St. Paul's. They know those teens do embodied poetry work. So they know if that's my community advocate, then they bet your bottom dollar, they're going to connect to that community. They're not just coming in. This is idea of like appropriation or taking people's stories right now. Like I'm not appreciating it. But this idea of you're going to involve the community because they're a part of it. So that's how you reach, for me, that's one way of resolution, by involving the community, not just making it about that community, not talking at them, but with them, to them, with, what I mean? Like not talking at them, that kind of thing, but look, we're in this together. Another way is to, as I call archiving the narrative, this idea of, okay, you're not going to make it out. We're going to record this. We're going to track this. We're going to document this in a way that if you want to come to it, if you need that type of accessibility, we can too. Because some people are like, they're not mobile. They can't make it there. They have the option to, look, I can't get off my job, but I really wanted to go, but is it streamed? Is there a way that I can watch this later? That comes up quite a bit, especially for the working class. For us, like, come on now, we had to set this side. We had to book this back in November to come for this for March, because our lives, right? So this idea of archiving it and then really driving the connection with the community, not at the community, but with the community. I think those are two very plausible ways to reach those who this would not be as accessible for. Yeah.
Cool. So, well, that's awesome. Yeah, like the with new technologies and stuff, what avenues do you think are going to be coming to the forefront more? Going beyond just this idea of social media and hashtags and things, but
I really am looking at making pieces more interactive, like an interactive museum type of piece. I know that the Smithsonian Black History Museum has this way of all the exhibits are now interactive. So this idea that you can go, this is something that I've been in the works with for a while, called Amplify with the St. Paul's Quadrant. This idea, so we're going to be recording narratives or spoken text or whatnot from different parts of the area. And so you'll pull up a map of St. Paul and you will click on these like designated points. It's all virtual at this point for now, because I mean, honestly, to walk through that area, I mean, they've made that in itself its own obstacle. Like they don't want you to get there. They put up blocks and barriers that you can't even get a bus through there. You can't even get a regular passenger van through there without having difficulty with potholes or whatever. So we would have to expand it to a way that hopefully people have more access, even just through their phones, maybe not a computer, but their phones. But anyway, these interactive points they can click and really see lived experiences rather than just watching a click by click video or scrolling through some kind of magazine or website, but this idea of an interactive archive. So, I can click from someone who used to live on A Street, boom, and what do they say about this or that? So I see it evolving by using people as the archive and not just their narratives, but the people and their narratives. Because this idea that you always have people telling someone else's history, tell your own damn history, but we have to give that tool to them. If they don't know how, I don't speak right. It's not about speaking right, it's about speaking of yourself, right? So that's a tool that we can show them and helping them modify what that narrative looks like. But I see it becoming more interactive, and in a way, when we're looking for funding to try to help this, I mean, this interactive map can be used countrywide. Like, let me hear about this. I think BET came out and did a nice docuseries, one episode about St. Paul. It was great. It pulled, I guess, some recognition, but in the same vein, what happened next, right? We need to continue to have more pieces like that.
do you like in that kind of thread there, do you see how do you see performers and audiences kind of playing off of one another and collaborating in these kinds of interactive things? Would that be kind of a goal of that?
I would hope so. I would hope so. This idea of this thing called forum theater, this idea that we put on a piece, we put up a situation or a scenario and we pause. And then we allow the audience to literally get up and step in or get up and interject into it. So this idea that it's an active dialogue, so we can talk about it. I just think about like growing up, and I grew up in this area, just wishing I had more folks to talk to rather than my parents or like my small circle about stuff. And then going to a piece of theater that they really asked me what I felt, or I could stop and interject. I'm hoping that there will be more opportunities for that. Catharsis is huge. Empathy is huge. That's what we watch our favorite shows, and that's what we watch our favorite shows over and over again, because we feel something there. When you make work not necessarily personal, but aesthetically challenged work can really unite things. And I'm not trying to say like kumbaya. That's not what I'm saying, because to be united doesn't mean we all have to be on on the same plane. We can, we can exist separately, but also be unified in us talking. Like, just people didn't understand there's complexities to it. But hopefully this kind of work can foster that and keep that going. So for instance, after you've done let's go back to the interactive archive thing, right? After you've watched this interactive archive, this is really cool. The museum, the Smithsonian did this too. You can go into your own booth and add to the archive yourself. So it becomes like an archive of the archive. It's really kind of dope. So this idea of it's always living and breathing, to see how someone was affected by this part of the archive and interacting with that part of the archive. And then hopefully still providing forums in person that people can come and still engage and talk about it. When I go back to St. Paul, I'm just going back to that because it's a living legacy there. And by completely getting rid of that area, that the legacy is leaving. The legacy of George Floyd is in pedigree. That's why I wrote the piece. The summer of 2020 is what happened with George Floyd, when we were all stuck in our homes because of a lockdown, watching this over and over and over again without a disclaimer, might I add. And this idea of wishing I had someone to talk this over with, that was what drove me to do that piece. That's what's driving me to work with St. Paul, this living legacy there. That's what drove me to work on my Sandra Bland piece called The Intersection, to keep that legacy of say her name alive, and not just saying her name, but embodying what she meant. I mean, that's why we do this work and the purpose for this work. So hopefully we still continue have a place for people to still process.
I couldn't agree more. And in the chat too, this idea of interactive archiving, being a continuous dialogue is great and super important. We have in the chat too a couple links to the ODU COVID-19 archive. Excellent. As well as social justice and activism archive that people can check out.
Excellent.
And just to kind of wrap up, I know we've talked about a lot, but just what's exciting for you in the near future? Can you share with us any upcoming projects, things that we can look forward to as well?
Yes, it's a huge one, actually. It's very big. It's called the Inheritance Project. They are a nationally known theater program or devised theater group. They started out of NYU about 10 years ago, and they got together and they create narratives for specific communities. And they have adapted or adopted Hampton Roads. Literally, at first it was going to be Norfolk, but Hampton Roads for their next project. It's called the Inheritance Project. I'll see if I can drop the link in there. Nonetheless, I've been, because I'm a practitioner of devised theater, I've been asked to come on as their assistant director. What's been beautiful about this project is that it has over 20 community partners, Teens with a Purpose, Hampton Roads Foundation, Virginia Arts Festival, name any city. Literally, we have an advocate or two or three organizations there. What's really beautiful about this project is that it's probably one of the first times that we've gotten together to try to put down on paper the exodus of this area, what brought people to this area, what hones the history and heartbeat of this area. We have the honor of performing it at the Addicts Theater, which is automatically in its own little history. I mean, just wow. So that's the 5th, 6th, and 7th of May. Our entire cast is local. They pretty much represent every 7 city. And we are building it from scratch. We talk about having clay and something in the water. The water here is building the piece. So that's what's coming up next. And I couldn't have been more happy. It's being completely archived and filmed by WHRO. So it's going to be tracked like through the entire process of even developing and building the script, how we building the bodies and building the ensemble together. And I have the honor of co-directing this beautiful project. So that's coming up in May. I'll see if I can drop it in the link while we're finishing up here.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Great.
I can't even lie.
That's fantastic to look forward to.
Here it is.
Well, I want to thank you again for and to to everyone that joined us this afternoon. It's been a great way to spend the afternoon for sure. Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing what you do with us. We appreciate it, and I hope that everyone with us joins us again tomorrow, Wednesday, at 1 p.m. for Meredith Magoon's presentation about costuming for opera, which is a look at the Costume Bibles collection for the Virginia Opera. I'm going to drop a link for the Arts in the Libraries Festival into the chat in case anyone would like more information or how to register. You can always follow the libraries on social media for updates and information. Keep an eye out on ODU's theater. And once again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Y'all have a good one. Thanks.